Hello everyone! So, on New Year's Eve, I finished watching Season 2 of Squid Game that just came out. Now, if I'm being honest, I wasn't a big fan of the first season. I think most people got sucked into the eye-catching aesthetics of the guys in the pink suits, as well as the deadly children's games as a concept. But I felt the show itself dragged on, the pace felt too slow at times, and while the show itself is clearly a critique of capitalism and wealth inequality, I think the concept was at times too abstract for normies to really catch on. However, this is not something I can say of Season 2. Without giving too many spoilers, I actually thought it was pretty good. From the games going in a different direction than expected, to having a character who, like the audience, had foresight into the games and effectively bringing us along, I think they overall did a good job. And the wealth inequality symbolism also became a lot more apparent with Season 2. Some might say almost too apparent, but I think it's necessary to really drive the point across. But to me, the key difference was with the characters themselves. I found the new players to be more interesting. They each stood out in their own way, from the circumstances that led them to the games being a lot more fleshed out, to how they interact with each other. And one such character that I think really shined in Season 2 was Hyun-ju, played by Park Sung-hoon. Okay, so quickly, I'm gonna be butchering all of these names. I apologize. In Season 2, Heju is a trans woman who accumulated debt from losing her job while in the middle of her medical transition, and she quickly integrates the main group of players, helping them to each game. And as the show progresses, she quickly stands out as a team player, someone who helps her teammates before helping herself, someone who is capable of both reassuring people when they need it, and pressuring them when they really need it. She's also shown to be very vulnerable at times, struggling with her appearance, struggling with how people perceive her, and simultaneously, she's shown towards the end to be a very capable leader in times of crisis. Now, the reason she's my favorite character is because on top of being really well written, the trans representation was done wonderfully. And I don't mean merely the fact that she is trans and that she's a trans character in a show, but rather, it's that through her presence in the show, we also get to witness how trans acceptance works on the most basic level. And that's what this video is about. I just want to share my opinion specifically with this character and why I liked her so much by doing a quick analysis of her character to show how relatable her experience is, as well as how trans acceptance is depicted. See, a lot of people don't get transgenderism, in that most people don't know much about it to begin with. So being initially confused by it or even put off is, I think, a normal response. But I don't think people are inherently transphobic. I just think people don't really understand it, and then when the media starts creating narratives around trans people being freaks and predators, that's when the stigma becomes really difficult to undo in people. But going back to Hyun-ju, her character is trans, and regardless of how the other characters around her feel about transgenderism, they're all stuck in the same room, they have to work together, and as such, they are bound to get to know each other. And that's when we see what trans acceptance looks like from the perspective of player 149, who is an old lady who came to the game to help out her son's debts. So she's an old lady, just looking out for her son, and like people her age, she's a little out with the times, you know? She knows virtually nothing of trans people. And not helping Hyun-ju here is that she did not complete her transition, so she still has a somewhat deep voice. Pre-transition, she was already a tall and fit person, so as a woman she tends to look larger, and so when player 149, or Yang, sees her for the first time, she's confused. Is this person a man or a woman? And when her son tries to quickly explain to her as things get awkward, she just gets more confused and she has no filter, you know? This doesn't make any sense. Either you're a man or you're a woman, is what she says. And this first impression really leans into the way Yeon initially tries to integrate the group. As a trans woman, she's very self-aware of the things about her that she feels look odd. She tends to speak little, and when she does, she speaks in a quiet tone because she's worried about her voice. That could also be my personal interpretation, but she also tends to hide her hands a lot initially, which I would say must be because she feels her hands are too large, but overall, she tries to simply not make herself too obvious. I think those subtle instances of seeing how she acts should already be by themselves a good representation of what it's like as a trans person to doubt yourself, as well as trying to integrate a community that you don't know how they might feel about you. But the moment that really did it for me is when all the characters are seated down after one of the games and they finally talk about themselves a bit. And the story told by Yoon here is in a lot of ways the same story that a lot of not only trans people, but many queer people as well have experienced in their lives. Her need to transition led her to losing her job and being disowned by her entire family. So she needs the money from the games to pay her medical debts, finish transitioning, and she also expresses a wish to move somewhere else and start fresh, somewhere she'll be accepted. The great thing about this scene is that the old lady just accepts Yeon from that moment on. She's talked to the trans woman she was put off by, and even though she may still not understand transgenderism, Just having that direct interaction, getting to see the human being, was all it took. They're both people, they're both players trying to get money to solve their own problems, and they both share a sense of compassion, so that's all there is to it. And one of the following scenes that really ferment this relationship is when Yang, Hyun, and another character have to go to the bathroom together. And when I was watching this scene, I was wondering if someone was going to comment on a trans woman going to the bathroom, which is one of the biggest anti-trans talking points in the media. You know, the idea that men are just casually saying they're woman to enter the woman's bathroom. But in the show, no one brings it up. No one hits at it in any way. And it really just makes sense when you think about it, because when you hear someone say that they essentially lost their entire family over their identity, as well as their career, and how much they're going through in the sole goal of being true to themselves, the idea that this same person would go through all of that just to enter the woman's bathroom to predate on cis women, it becomes completely ridiculous, doesn't it? Fundamentally, it's an argument that strips trans women of all humanity in order to demonize them. But in practice, it's not an argument these characters can make after talking to Yoon, and really just seeing the humanity in her. At the same time, it's worth noting that Yang herself is still an old lady with a minimal understanding of trans issues. She hasn't shown an understanding of the difference between sex and gender, for example, but by that point, it doesn't matter. She understands where Hyun is coming from, and she chose to respect her, because even though she may not fully understand her, she's still an empathic, caring person. Later, she talks to the main group, like a grandma, about inviting all of them for dinner when they leave the games, and here she invites Hyun just like everyone else. And so that's that. The reason I like the inclusion of this trans character so much is because, for one, it brings humanity to a group of people that is often stripped of it, in a way that is grounded in reality, while it also shows that at its root, trans acceptance comes easily by being in proximity to trans people. Exposure really is what it is. And to be clear, it's not just for trans people. There are a lot of stories out there of people with prejudices towards certain groups and overcoming these prejudices by exposing themselves to said groups. Bigotry is not rational and cannot be simply debunked with facts, but it can be addressed with exposure by giving people this personal interaction, this personal exposure that forces them to challenge their preconceptions, which is why representation in the media is so important. All this to say that if you watch Squid Game Season 2 and you see this character and somehow you can't bring yourself to root for her, even though she's clearly on the good side, and even though you would root for all the other good characters, I would think it's really sad, and a failure on your part to appreciate the show for what it intended to do. Hyun isn't just a trans character for Netflix to check off the diversity quota. She represents, like the rest of the players in Squid Game, people who are marginalized, both economically and socially. And by teaming up with the rebels towards the end, she also shows that when people accept each other and work together instead of getting hung up on prejudices, they can achieve a lot more. And I can't overstate it, she's also well written and acted all around. I mean, I'm not even getting into how she literally steals the show in the last episode. It was so cool to see her take the lead. Overall, Season 2 I found better than Season 1, and a big part of that, I credit that to the character of Hyun-ju. Well written and perfectly acted. The only issue, I know some people were annoyed that the character was played by a cis man as opposed to a trans woman actor, or even just a woman, and while I think it's absolutely fair to ask for this, the director did explain that finding a trans woman actress was actually very difficult in South Korea, a country that is still very culturally conservative, and there's a lot of stigma there. And not only did they have a hard time finding a trans actor, they were also getting worried that putting a trans actor in the show might out this trans actor to their community, which could be even more dangerous. Which is to say that trans acceptance in South Korea still has a very long way to go, and whether they got a trans actor or a cis man to play the part, I think what really matters here is the representation and how they've done it. And I think they've done it very well. I think the actor was great. And to be clear, with the way the character is written, I feel it would be hard to doubt the genuinely pro-trans position of the show and the creators. The best we can hope for this at this point is that the show succeeds in pushing further trans acceptance, especially in South Korea, so that more trans actors become available for future projects. It's a minor point though, and it doesn't change how I feel about the character. So really I wanted to share my thoughts because I really enjoyed the show and the character. But that's it. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.